and it's true, that we don't have a lot of publications out there. But you need to look at all the literature. So for me, it didn't stop me. I did my dissertation based on Trinidad and Tobago participants and on knowledge, attitude, and perception of sports psychology consultation. And most of the work that I was using was more from historians. CLR James in particular, he talked about this colonial mentality. And it was a really interesting concept because I had to step out of sport. How could I know about sport or sports psychology if all I know is sports psychology? Yes? So I had to go back in, and he was talking about this slavery and this racial past that we have, or the residual effect of slavery that we still have as much as we are informed and we are educated and we could brag about the university that we have graduated from. He said, we are still stuck with a residual effect in our psyche. So we are burdened by it. One of the interesting things is that I started looking at British writers. Now, a lot of these writers are interested in us. And they were writing and saying that, look how these Caribbean athletes are changing the form of soccer. We play with a different style. I had the privilege of talking with Lystra Lois, and she was saying the same thing when she reflected on that great netball times that we had in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah? And now we see the same flair with Jamaica. There is something that we have in the region that the rest of the world has already acknowledged and desire, and we haven't claimed that as yet. The writings are coming from them. One of the other things that CLR James said, he said, listen, this whole thing called education, he said, the British gave us education, they gave us religion, and they gave us cricket. And when they gave us cricket, it wasn't to make us great cricketers. It was so that we can transform and be very subservient. And he called it having a tight upper lip. We were supposed to be controlled by cricket. He just didn't tell our legends that. So we celebrated every time, historically, every time we beat England, we will celebrate. There were 30 years that England could not beat us. It's only in relatively recent time England is bragging about it. But there was a certain kind of intensity and intention every time we had to play them. We must know our history, because what it does, it settles us. So my research is more on looking at, I did this in my dissertation in 2000, and as I was called back, and it was Catherine Ford in 2002, Commonwealth Games, Manchester, who called me back and said, could you do something for us? So then I needed to have some baseline research. So that's when I did my dissertation. But because I am now coming back in through the Ministry of Sport, who say, could you do this? It's build sports psychology, but I was already doing it. And if Terry Ali was here, I'm very close to all of the Caribbean islands. I've worked in all of the Caribbean islands through the Caribbean Sport Medicine Congress. I was the only trained sports psychologist in the region. Let me just say it. I'm still waiting for my phone call from cricket. But that's another story. And it's time, right? Yeah? Yeah? So I kind of revamped. And they did a call. The Ministry of Sport did a quick call, and people came. And you can see, my good friend, right? She's right there in the audience there. Peggy. They all came. So I started looking at some of the work of CLR James and some of the British writers, and started looking not only at cricket, but I took it to all of the other sports as well. I'm going backwards, aren't I? And some of the people were saying, writers were saying, that there's a number of, that you as Caribbean people are reluctant to work with a sports psychologist. And there were certain reasons why you were so reluctant. And he said, the perception is that what we do is mumbo jumbo. Yeah? And there was a stigma, it was stigmatized because only crazy people talk to psychologists. So there was always a reluctance. So when athletes want to talk to us, they would kind of pull us in a little room and have this conversation. I was working. Remember, I was working with the U.S. athletes. And the U.S. athletes, everybody would come and talk. They would line up to have a conversation in front of everywhere. But when I first started in 2002, athletes were kind of pulling me aside to whisper that they're scared. And I now go on an assumption that all athletes, they're scared. They always have some issues that we can work on. So I kind of help them to navigate through their issues. So now I'm seeing the changes, especially in London. We developed a synergy. And yes, Annette Nat, she was the chef, and it was an amazing energy. And that is what caused the difference. I have a 5-minute prompt. So it was about irrelevance, a lot of humiliation that was associated to it. So some of us didn't want to be called a psychologist, and we go into sports psychology consultant. I call myself an educational sports psychologist. But what I noticed is that I couldn't do my work without understanding my culture. So I started looking at some of the research that was done in New Zealand. It was kind of a smaller country, kind of resembles something like ours. And I tweaked some of the questionnaires, and I did this research. Now, most of the people who did, or participants who did the research, most of them have never played at a high level or regional level in sport. The gender was mostly male, and some females. What I found is that what they were saying is that when I asked, do you adequately meet the sport person's psychological needs, most of them honestly said no. When I asked, are you comfortable dealing with the sports person's psychological needs, some of them said yes. In fact, a lot of them said yes, as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I'll be interested in working with a sports psychologist, and they will be interested in working with a sports psychologist. So that was an opener in a baseline study for me, that they wanted my services. But the thing is that it's very difficult to sell this. Even though they were saying it, it is difficult to sell it to a coach. Because now a coach has to share glory with a sports psychologist. And that's where one of my biggest problems have been. And that's why I always acknowledge Ishmael, because Ishmael, as a Cuban coach, he opened up, and he will come and he would say, even when we're on the track, on the field, he will come and he would whisper something to me, and I'll say, okay, I'll do it from the mental aspect. And he will go. I was totally a part of his plan. And that was significant. The importance of sport, they all believed that it was extremely important, so theoretically, I was getting exactly what I wanted. Once I started to practice, it was a little different. Netball embraced, but netball's coach at that time, for 2010, was an Australian. So I'm still trying to make where I'm totally welcome by our local coaches. Yeah? I'm getting some real respect, so I'm not knocking those of you who are here. Yes? So what I did, and I'm almost done, so what I did was I started going into who we are. And that's how I claim myself. And really on who you are. So that I finished, I did Oxford University, did a presentation just like this. Anywhere I go in the world, they know who I am. I'm you, the little girl from Mayaro. Just raised up through Mayaro government, southeast Port of Spain, the market school behind the bridge. Falsen Teachers College, or HBCU, Spelman College, I couldn't have done better. Yeah? And that has been my journey. This is who I am. Temple University, Temple, you see Temple everywhere. Temple, we're everywhere. And I did my postdoc at Purdue University, which sealed it off perfectly. I left Purdue to actually go to Westchester because I could travel to the Caribbean easier. But I embraced everything. I want to know what the athletes listen to. When they're nervous, they listen to soca. Believe it or not, they listen to soca. Some of them listen to calypso. And you must ask J. Hugh Gordon what he was singing at the World Championship. I didn't get invited to the World Championship, but I got the phone calls. 7 hours difference. I'll get a text saying, "Are you up?" And I'll text back, "I am now." Yeah? Behind the scenes, and no one knew. We embrace everything. So, in conclusion, what I'm looking at is that we are different as a people. We have a collective consciousness versus an independent. As much as we have bought into the Western ideology as far as this independent thinking and I, when you talk, listen to yourselves. We always say we. It is we. And we were taught to kind of break away from that, and for me, that is cognitive dissonance. We trouble our sense of self. We must come back into that collective consciousness, because that is part of our survival thrust when we are faced with external problems or challenges. So it was about an interdependency. We love athletes. I try to stop them from reading the newspapers when they go on tour, but they want to hear what you say about them. And they get deflated when they get all these negative things. They're trying so hard, and they so want to please you. And then they read something on the web, and it breaks their spirits. Because we got to understand that every word we say, it goes through our system. We need to be more responsible for what comes out of our mouths. Because we cannot move forward. As much as we talk about moving forward, we can't move forward breaking somebody else's backs. I got this nice email from, or a journal from some of the administrators, and they love the sports psychology programs. We do it every year, and last weekend in May, sorry. It's a bold plug for the sports psychology program. They send feedback all the time, and saying, hey, listen, we did horribly the last year, but because of the sports psychology program, we changed some of our mental attitudes, and we have done better. I love these personal notes because they're testimonies testimonies. So, for me, that go back and fetch and read everything. Don't just read the sport literature. And the sport literature that we're going to be writing, let it have some of the general as well. Because this is what is going to, we got to know who we are and who we represent. We must know who is not us and how we relate to these people. We try to be. We want to be. Trinidadians want to be now like Jamaicans because Jamaicans are on top. We want to be more like Americans. Or, okay, let's run and let's do something like the British. That seemed to work. Or the Australians are doing something great. So we are just like taking little pieces of everybody and not realizing how powerful we are. Because our relationship, when we know who we are, we're going to form better relationships. And we'll go to the track as equal competitors. And we must understand that